Guess what? We're bringing the series back and going over prospects a year after they had been drafted in the 1 Year Later show. I think if you're a fan of the channel that's been here for a while, you've probably seen a few 1 year videos popping up, or not 1 year videos, 1 year later videos, excuse me, popping up throughout the years, talking about prospects ever since like 2020, I guess, we started making videos like these. Well, there is indeed an extended conversation to have about the folks drafted in the 2021 NHL Entry Draft, and so with that being established, I think it segues nicely into starting up the 1 Year Later series once more for the folks of 2021. In the first episode, we're not going to go over one of the guys that was at the very, very top. We're not going over first overall Owen Power. We're not going over second overall Matty Beniers. We're skipping all the way to fourth because when it comes to defenseman prospects that are drafted in this spot, from the Cale Makars of the world to the Bowen Byrams, you could say that as of late, the fourth overall spot being taken by defensemen usually bodes some pretty well results. And that's exactly what we have here as we head over to New Jersey and talk about Jack Hughes and Quinn Hughes' younger brother, Luke Hughes. Luke Hughes is one of the best defenseman prospects in the entire NHL, if not the absolute best, and one of the best prospects in general that is affiliated with a National Hockey League team. He's 18 years old, 6'2", 183 as a left-handed defenseman, born September 9th, 2003. That is very significant because he was only 6 days away, yeah, I got the math wrong, go figure, 6 days away from being eligible for the 2022 NHL Entry Draft. He's that young. This actually does come up when you converse about other prospects drafted in 2021, like Owen Power, for example, who is almost a full calendar year older than Luke Hughes. It's just kind of how the dominoes fall, because that's how the NHL Draft eligibility is decided if your birthday is before or after September 15th of the draft year, but for Luke Hughes, age was definitely on his side, as he was one of the youngest players, period, drafted in 2021. He is, as you can tell, a Hughes brother, and he happens to be the biggest of the three. Where Quinn and Jack are in the 5'10 area, Luke Hughes is 6'2", 183. This has been a pretty big note to make of the Hughes brothers, especially when Luke was younger. Because when Luke was going out there playing for the Little Caesars team in the 15U AAA League, he was really, really good. And even though he was a little bit bigger than what Quinn and Jack were at that same age range, he could still move around like those two. Now, when it comes to the skating, we'll get into that a little bit later, but for Luke Hughes, he was drafted out of the NTDP, where he was the best defenseman for that club. He had 34 points in 38 games played, and he was heading over to the University of Michigan the next season. There, he took on Quinn's elusive number 43, and he went out there and produced one of the best 18-year-old seasons the NCAA has seen for a defenseman in quite some time. Let's go back over to 1991-1992 and sort U19 defensemen in the NCAA by goals, points, and points per game. You could see that Luke Hughes had himself the best goal-productive season with 17 goals in the 41-game sample that he had. Screw the games played. He went out there and scored almost 20 goals for Michigan as an 18-year-old. If you go over to total points, you can see that Luke Hughes was second on the entire board, in front of guys like Zach Werenski, Justin Falk, Jack Johnson, just slightly behind Adam Fox, who is playing for Harvard. Now, Harvard plays in the Ivy League, so they're playing against teams like Cornell. You've got, I think, Union's thrown in there, not really too sure. Princeton, I know, is in the Ivy League. And that division of NCAA hockey just isn't that competitive compared to what Luke Hughes went out there and had to play against with the University of Michigan Wolverines, against the Michigan State University team, University of Wisconsin, etc., etc. So Luke Hughes was playing against more difficult competition. He had roughly the same amount of points as Adam Fox, and if you go over to points per game, you can see that Luke Hughes was still one of the top defensemen for U19 players. He was behind Patrick Wierkoch, of all people, who ended up not really becoming all too great. But Wierkoch aside, Luke Hughes still had himself a season for the ages, as he was sub-point per game. He also was over a point per game for Team USA at the World Juniors, again, as an 18-year-old. This is significant because the World Juniors is a U20 tournament, meaning that guys who are turning 20 in that season and players that are 19, they're all kind of the ones that dominate the score sheet. So for Luke Hughes to go out there and put up a goal and 5 assists in 5 games played as one of the younger guys that are suiting up for the teams, it's pretty good. He also suited up for Team USA at the regular World Championships, getting 4 points in 10 games in the process. This was against men, so it's very nice to see him being able to translate and play with competition of that stature. Now, at the moment, he has not signed with the Devils. It does not appear that he is going to do that, so he'll likely go back over to Michigan and just absolutely take over the show, as the Wolverines are going to have themselves some pretty good names, like Adam Fantilli, for example. That guy is going to be a Michigan Wolverine, not to mention other names like Seamus Casey, who is also a Devils prospect, one that I absolutely love. Rutger McGroarty is also a new addition to the squad, and so for Luke Hughes, he's going to have a pretty good team playing with him next season, and all we could do is really hope that everything translates. The offensive IQ, the mobility, the skating. Speaking about the skating, let's talk about the skating comparative to his brothers. Now, Jack Hughes is probably the fastest, most nimble of the Hughes because he is a center. He is tasked with being able to do things like that. I would say that Quinn Hughes is a little bit more on the spinny side. Like, he's really, really good with his edges. He's really good at pivoting, going back and forth, left and right, and then spinning around to get by guys. Luke has a little bit of a better stride, I would say, than Quinn. He isn't as agile left to right and with his edges than I would say Quinn is, but he's a little bit bigger, he's a little bit faster, and as a result, I think he's a little bit more pressuring along the boards than Quinn is as well. So while Quinn might be a little bit more of a tornado or a Beyblade going out there spinning back and forth, Luke Hughes has a no-nonsense approach to defense, and especially when he has the puck in the offensive zone too, where he can just skate back and forth down the wings and create offense in the same way that we know the Hughes brothers are able to. With his offensive IQ, he's actually a little bit better of a shooter than Quinn Hughes as well, hence the 17 goals that he had in the year. And so right away, Luke Hughes has really stood amongst the pack as being one of the best defenseman prospects, if not heck, prospects in the NHL, period. Let's go over to a post made by Byron Bader on Twitter. 4 out of 5 D-men from the past 40 years to hit an equivalency in their draft +1 season in the NCAA on the same level or higher than Owen Power and Luke Hughes turned into big-time stars in the NHL. Brian Leetch, Zach Werenski, Adam Fox, and Quinn Hughes. That's very encouraging. What he's pretty much saying is that out of the 5 D-men to have gotten the same amount of production in their draft +1 season in the NCAA as Power and Hughes, 4 out of 5 of them were amazing. And the last one actually is Patrick Weirkoch, so yeah, we're kind of going to go out there and disregard him. He's the one that didn't. But at the end of the day, if you have yourselves a guy in Luke Hughes that eventually becomes one of the Brian Leetches or the Zach Werenskis or the Adam Foxes or the Quinn Hugheses of the world, you really shouldn't be all too surprised, because players like this who are going to go out there and produce in the way that they have and impact the game in the way that they have and make Team USA at the World Juniors and the World Championships as young as they have, you don't see players like these often, and when you do, they usually become superstars, unless their name is Patrick Weirkoch. Of course, knock on wood that Luke Hughes does not become that. At the end of the day, though, talk to the comments your thoughts about Luke Hughes. He's a guy that honestly does compare so much to Owen Power that you could definitely have made a debate that he should have gone first overall. And there were some rumors going around out there saying that if the Devils had the first overall pick, they might have just gone out there and taken Luke first. He had a similar points per game to Power. Power had 32 points in 33 games played, whereas Luke Hughes had 39 points in 41 games. He had way more goals than Power, although Power did have a few more assists here and there. So, talk to the comments your thoughts about Luke Hughes and his entire profile 1 year after being drafted. Devils fans, what do you think the ceiling is for this guy? I think long-term, if he's playing number 1, number 2 defenseman minutes alongside a Simon Nemec or a Dougie Hamilton, you're kind of laughing because, yeah, you talk about Cale Makar and Bowen Byram and what that could be heading into the next few years. This is somewhat in a similar realm, I feel, if not maybe even a tad better. I mean, Cale Makar is arguably the best defenseman the NHL has seen in a long time, but for Luke Hughes and Simon Nemec, I mean, these two guys together probably could be one of the best pairings that we've seen in a long time as well. So, talk in the comments all your thoughts about Luke Hughes and his draft +1 season. Where do you think he goes in the next few years in his career, and how well do you think he's going to be able to perform once he makes the NHL, let's say in 2023, 2024, if he does not sign a contract anytime soon? I hope you enjoyed this video, Juraj, and bye.